It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. It is Feedback Friday, and the bike is totally in the background of my shot, and I can't be fucked to move it. And Delilah's in the co-pilot seat, but you can't see her. She's right at a view. And we're jamming this way, y'all. So we're going to talk more Lady Dimitrescu today. Because, yes, you're very cute, Delilah. Okay, Delilah wants to talk Lady Delilah. Come here, honey. You can be part of this video because you're the eldest lady in the house. Yes, here we go, sweetie. There we are. We have cat. All is good. Okay, yes. Okay, so Lady Dimitrescu is a phenomenon. Clearly the most popular video this week. And no surprise I did more research on the dress. But before I get to that, because this is a creation, folks, I am very, 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 very interested in the decisions they made. It is very the way Japanese pop culture like takes something Western and puts it in a blender and adds a bunch of cool shit and spits it back out on us. But I'll get to your comments first. If you like this sort of thing, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, because this is one of the girliest things I do, is obsessing over clothes in the form of cosplay. You may notice I really don't give a shit about the clothes I wear every day, but cosplay, different story, man. Okay, but first, this comment by Important Joe jumped out at me because I think it sort of speaks for a lot of longtime Resident Evil fans right, we may not have thought this through. Or maybe we totally did and we're okay with it. But Important Joe said, she's obviously the new tyrant. Now imagine her being blown up by a bazooka. If not, Resident Evil is sexist. And I know I did, but I don't know about the rest of you. I kind of assumed that's how it's going to end. Because I played enough Resident Evil games. But maybe, maybe they'll go this one sideways and be, I don't know. Well, a lot of Resident Evil characters have been presumed dead and come back. But maybe she's not Tyrant. Maybe she's a new Wesker. Who knows, right? Like, it's possible. I'm pulling for the new Wesker, but I admit the new Tyrant makes more sense because she's so freaking tall. How could she blend into society? But Justice Soltuna said, there's a lot to like about this villain, a big and bold, literally and metaphorically, female villain that's visually striking, somewhat campy, and also slightly different for the series. It gets people interested in RE8, but also provides fantasy fodder for perverts like me. Haha. That was a very honest comment. Thank you, Justice Soltuna. But also, I think, the focus on the camp as being kind of a hallmark of Resident Evil. And I wonder if that's why I'm not quite so much into Resident Evil 2 as other people. I don't know why. I need the campy mixed with the scary. So that constantly being chased, really not my jam. I appreciate what they did with it, but really not my jam. But it also just, I don't know. The camp isn't there in the remakes the way they were in the original games. And I'm happy to see the camp back. I am pulling for the camp. The camp is important. So this comment was a bit off topic, but it's like, okay, it was a tangent, but tangents are okay. I like tangents. I think in tangents. Sterling7 said, well, I have nothing against men who are more sexually submissive in nature. I find the tendency of our culture to simultaneously demand that men constantly reassure others, especially women, that they are harmless and unaggressive, combined with the simultaneous tendency to demean and punish men for being harmless and unaggressive, really aggravating. I know that wasn't your point, Leanna, and like everything, there's room for diversity. It's just the notion of wanting to have examples of gamers who are not interested in power fantasy makes me want to snarl at the scrutinizers. And what's wrong with enjoying a power fantasy or two? Oh, feckless cultural scolds. Provide examples and be ready to have your work critique for once. Now, Sterling, I love the Doom games. Like, I love Doom Eternal. I love Doom 2016. So I'm not one to say there's anything wrong with power fantasy, right? I consider There was a whole thing about Miranda's butt shots this week in Mass Effect 2. And personally, I took every one of those butt shots as kind of this is the power that women like that hold. I am not one of them, so I feel spat at, which is why I didn't like Miranda. But that's a personal thing, right? Like, other characters, the less conventionally perfect, barf. I hate that part of Miranda. I hate it. But that's why I think like the objectification in Mass Effect 2 worked, because perfect means object. Yes, it does. She was a designer baby made from a copy of her father's genome. The perfect woman has no mother. It's disturbing. I don't think Mass Effect 2 truly understood how disturbing it is, but by Mass Effect 3, they kind of got it down. But I play a lot of games that are straight up power fantasy. I mean, personally, the reason I hate The Sims is I find The Sims the ultimate power fantasy. You are like controlling people's lives. The Sims is too power fantasy to me, because in The Sims, you're just controlling people's lives and nothing's trying to kill you back, right? That's too much for me. I need resistance, so I don't feel quite so, I am God, wabba dee ba doo, fucker. It's too much for me. But obviously controlling the lives of peon people is not my particular power fantasy jam. I want to be a butt ugly dude that gets shit done. Tells me a lot about my own identity, doesn't it, right? That's why I loved Gears of War. They were butt ugly dudes that got shit done. And the minute we went to these new younger characters that were prettier, I was less interested. Because once again, how do you wear a knit cap in a firefight like that and be running and jumping and flipping around and have it not fall off your head? Not my kind of power fantasy, right? I want butt ugly dudes who get shit done. And I know that the butt ugly in part was the limitations of technology, but I just like people who are not as perfected. Now, that doesn't mean that it's less of a power fantasy. It means it's a different kind of power fantasy. It's power to the ugly people, right? We still get shit done. And that, I know, you're like, what do you mean ugly? This is childhood stuff, right? That's how I was treated as a kid. And that's, I think, the role of power fantasy. Is power fantasy soothe your inner child. It takes that thing, it takes your insecurities, it takes the things that you feel less than okay about, and for whatever reason gives that space a boost, you know? So when I was a kid and a teenager and felt ugly, in part because of gingerphobia, you know, that's why I identify with monsters. That's why I was like, oh, cool, Beast from X-Men is my dude, because his insides don't really match his outsides, and he's like super smart and can quote poetry, but all people go is, ew, you're a furry freak, I don't like you. Like, he has so much more to offer, and you're just basing him on his appearance. I connected with that. You know, the same way I kind of connect with characters that save the world and get shit on anyway, right? Like, you know, I like my power fantasy covered in guts, and you like, you know, stab eyeballs with demons and you save the universe and nobody knows, and then there's a bunny. Yes, I just described Doom Eternal. I told you, I love Doom Eternal. You know, then you get into other games like Disco Elysium, which is not power fantasy at all. It's, you know, it's one of the few games I've ever played where I felt the main character was like truly pathetic. And it worked. But in part, I think it worked because I could juxtapose it against Planescape Torment. I don't know what I'd think about Disco Elysium if it wasn't, you know, structurally like James Joyce's Ulysses to Homer's The Odyssey, Torment's The Odyssey. And I love the fact that we're getting games like that has that relationship. It shows a maturation of the industry and storytelling, that we have our own touchstones, right? We're not borrowing from movies anymore. We're borrowing from other games, which is a freaking awesome place to be. But that was a long way to go to say, I don't want power fantasy all the time, But I agree that there's absolutely nothing wrong with enjoying power fantasy. I think it's the content of the power fantasy that can sometimes be disturbing. Like, I don't know anybody who wasn't at least slightly disturbed by the Trevor scenes in Grand Theft Auto 5. I know some people like, Trevor's funny, but those torture scenes, I mean, if somebody's like, yeah, that's power fantasy, I'm a little scared, right? There's an element of power fantasy that's in the eye of the beholder. Like, to me, Trevor stands out in Grand Theft Auto 5 because he's the crazy dude and he's the most self-aware to me. That's just my own personal interpretation. But you know, that is not enjoyable for me. But playing the leader of the Saints, who is, you know, still a criminal, the whole point of, you know, the later Saints Row games is this is a world where criminals become celebrities with everything that comes with that, right? These are the idols that other people look up to, a gang. And so I make my character look like Nicki Minaj, and I'm a female character, and there's still, you know, female strippers in the White House, and that's another form of power fantasy. Sweet. And I admit this Lady Dimitrescu thing is giving me a boost in that regard. Because after constantly seeing crap on the internet from those feckless cultural scolds running down my body type, I finally get a little bit of, you know, yeah, okay. I'm not super tall, right? Like, I'm not that, but I'm one of these people who goes through the world feeling too big for everything. I don't know how to explain it other than that. But, you know, it's like, hey, people like that. Not everybody thinks that's a monster in a bad way. Sweet. You know? Awesome. And so, yes, Sterling, I agree with you. There is nothing wrong with power fantasy as long as, you know, it depends on what powers you're talking about. And I mean, obviously, you know, the fact that I find The Sims disturbing and Doom Eternal really not says a lot about me. And I'm not saying there's any right or wrong with this. I think the reasons that somebody connects to a power fantasy are more important than what the power, you know, that it's a power fantasy. Now, the question is, what would a female power fantasy look like? And the thing is, traditionally, female power fantasies are, you know, like Twilight, that the girl's insecure and, oh, I know he's going to hate me. Oh, no, he's obsessed with me. That is a female power fantasy. Okay? A super powerful, awesome dude is obsessed with this plain Jane female character who is secretly actually beautiful. She just doesn't know it. Cue the plot of so many damn romance novels. The entire romance genre is essentially female power fantasy. So guess what? If we want more female power fantasy in video games, we need more sex. We need more feminized things, you know. I would like to see thicker women represented, just because there's a lot of guys out there that like that. But also, I just think that every time they stick a B-cup brown hair Mick ponytail, you know, some version of Ellie from The Last of Us, oh look, Lara Croft 2 now, that is a flex of the type of woman that this current crop of game developers think is the kind of attractive you'll take home to mom. What does that say about the rest of us? Right? It's tired. It's still forcing women into this tiny realm of acceptability. And Sterling, that's like the other side of, you know, men are supposed to reassure that, oh, I'm not scary. And then they're being punished for seeming not scary. Women have a similar thing, right? Like, media is like, you know, oh, if you want to be noticed, you have to look like trash, what we call trash. If you don't look like trash. Oh, okay, we'll depict you as respectable, but everybody's going to ignore you. That's the media message. I'm not saying it's true. I'm saying that that's the message, similar. So hopefully that was an interesting bit of dialogue on a tangent, because I don't mind tangents if they're interesting. Ace Badhound, whose username I love, left a really, it was a delightfully fanboy comment, starting with rubs hands together. Oh boy, here we go. My favorite game franchise. This is probably going to seem like a jumble of words. This franchise is so special and important to me in terms of how it helped me get through tough times and still does to this day. The cheese that each game has given since day one has made me laugh and provided escapism, while the horror side always reminds me that things could be so much worse. Interesting perspective. I've never really had a game in this series that I dislike, mostly just elements of individual games. Characters are some of my favorites in gaming. Enemies, while not original 90%, you can point towards certain horror films, whether serious or campy in terms of possible inspiration. Giant spiders or crows, for example, are effective in some way, and the locations always ooze with some kind of atmosphere. Totally agree with you on the atmosphere, man. I think that's a hallmark of the series. Village has me excited because I'm so curious to see how they'll handle the very gothic Bloodborne style of the era. I did not make the connection to Bloodborne, but I see your point. And they'll find a way to explain the whole vampires and werewolves through science. Another thing I didn't think of. I still didn't quite understand the initial freakout some people had when it came to the fact that enemies are possibly werewolves and vampires, when previous games had things like leeches that could form human bodies and a giant alligator. How there was a zombie element in Outbreak File number 2. I am with you on that one. I'm telling you, the high water mark for me was that little person driving the big, huge statue. In terms of the design of Lady Dimitrescu, 9 out of 10. In terms of sex appeal, it does nothing for me. Not into women. Fair, dude. But I just love the hat and the dress. It has this look to me that feels familiar and yet kind of new at the same time. That, or like you said, it's a design that's been kind of absent for a long time in gaming. Meanwhile, on the Silent Hill side of things, cricket noises. Okay, we're not going to be sad about Silent Hill. I want to go back to that dress. Because, oh my God, this dress. You may notice I am obsessing over this dress. And there is a potential inspiration for this dress that somebody posted on the internet. And as you can tell, I'm kind of obsessed. I'm going to show you this picture, and then I'm going to compare it to what they did with it, because this does not make me less impressed that there was, a specific dress that inspired things. This is making me more impressed because what they did with this dress. Okay. Here's the dress. You see why people are like, oh yeah, this is totally the dress. Hang on. I blew it up too much. There we go. Okay. So you see, here's the hat and basically the hair. But yes, this is the same essential shape, but it is a starting point. Part of the problem is that obviously this model does not, they're White Castle sliders. They're not like double Whoppers with cheese, right? In the bodice. And that's when that issue, I've never had the word milkers in the comment section of my YouTube videos so often before. But we don't judge on Lady Dimitrescu. But that giving space for the sweater meat led to a cascade effect on the design. Now, they have complicated the gather. I don't know if you noticed that this sort of arches like a clamshell in the original dress. That's not what's happening here. They've actually like instead of it just all gathering, they've actually done a tuck, which is more complicated, and it disconnects this section from the rest of the dress more than in that. That's an extra layer of complexity, but it is this area that because they had to let it out to contain the majesty, there's only about an inch difference from the armpit here to the seam going across the bodice. There is much more of an inch here. Now, it's not even sitting in the same place. Like, there's no cleavage. It's right on the breastbone. The neckline of this dress would sit, if it were the same, where this first seam is. You see this first seam? Right here? That's where the actual neckline of the dress would be. Now, the problem when you're built like this, learn from my suffering, is that if the neckline of the dress starts, that's a good 3-4 inches based on her height. If the neckline starts 3-4 inches higher than it would be on women with, molehills instead of mountains, then your waistline ends up sitting 3-4 inches higher than where it's freaking supposed to. This is why it's so hard for me to find Empire line gowns or Regency style gowns that don't look like I'm trying to do lollygoth fashion. Okay? It's just ugly. And so they have had to basically do what they had to do to me in a production of Guys and Dolls when I took over from a company member, a swing company member who couldn't do it anymore. It's a dance part. The costume fit me everywhere but the boobs. So they had to actually cut the costume in half and add a panel. Now, they did it along the waist, and we kind of covered it with sequins. But this is the same thing. Instead of doing it at the waist, because obviously you can't, there's no seam here. The seams on this dress go down here. It doesn't seem like it looks like they've tucked the seam under here. They've hidden it instead of going right down. That might be lining, though. That might be lining. Yeah. But so they've had to do exactly what they did to me in this Guys and Dolls costume. They basically hacked off the sleeve, dropped the dress so the waist is in the right place, and added a panel, and then added a big flower so it didn't look quite as funny. And this is always an issue I have with dresses because of the proportion issue. Something always seems kind of off with square necklines, because either they're sitting too high and they look weird, or they're sitting like oddly low, like they've got here. Just something seems, now that's the angle too here. Obviously they've kind of fisheye affected this, so it's not quite as wide. You see here, it's not quite as wide, but they've added to this dress. And then the sleeve, the complications begin. It looks like there's a button. This is not, keep in mind, they had no stretch fabrics back then, right? So they had to drape the arm so there's enough room to move. You'll notice the way the fabric's kind of sagging right there. A lot of women today don't like the way this particular fabric drape works. It's very common in high-end silk bridal because silk will rip if you look at it the wrong way. But you'll see here, they've gathered it. So there's like the give is there. She can't raise her arms above her head in real life without that tearing. Now there's something going on back here. I'm not sure what. Maybe it's a big bow or something like that. But that sleeve is going all the way down. I can't tell if it hooks over the hand, but you'll notice that's a much more complicated sleeve than they've got going on this dress. You see there's a bracelet on that, but they have just added complexity to this dress, and it's subtle, but it's the difference between me going, yeah, okay, that's a dress of the period, and what is that? And obviously, I mean, the hat's got a bit more pizzazz, the way you can do in video games. But this is definitely the inspiration for this character. Now also, okay, if it was Lady Dimitrescu her hip would be up where this lady's shoulders are. But this is what's pretty cool about adaptations like this. This isn't just, oh, a dude wanted to put a whole bunch of doodads on a dress. It was actually an issue created by the chesticles that you don't get into with her daughters, because obviously, you know, there are plenty of examples of how a dress would fit on that physique, but somebody had to figure this out. And look, there's something going on. Like, what's she doing with her? Where's her hand? Her hand's on her back. And it's like the glove comes up here, which there are styles that do that. But that's obviously not happening in this dress, right? Like that sleeve vexes me. Vexes me. Like, the only way for a cosplayer to do that sleeve accurately is to put it on a person and like form fit it, because if you don't get that gather area spot on, you're making a whole new sleeve. But it is pretty, and her anatomy is, you know, strangely, her arms bend without having to shave a piece off, like Abby in The Last of Us 2. But I digress. That was mean. Okay. You can tell I'm obsessed with the design that went into this character. And it gives me something to look forward to. But I want to know, I'm going to try a YouTube poll this time. I just discovered YouTube polls exist. I want to know what you guys think. Do you think Lady Dimitrescu ends up big splattery mess like Tyrant? Or do you think Lady Dimitrescu ends up as sort of an ongoing series villain like Wesker? Or do you think that Capcom is now going, maybe we should make her a Wesker? She's really popular. So we'll do 3 options. Okay, I don't know how these polls work. I think I'll post it. It goes in the community section, but maybe I'll post it in this video. I don't know. I'm going to figure it out, but I'm going to set up a poll, because I didn't realize you could do polls straight through YouTube, and this is going to be helpful to me in terms of sussing out opinions when I ask things like this, instead of having to do comments and kind of go, oh, okay, I can actually do a poll. Awesome. Okay, everybody, have a great weekend. It's a little warmer here the last couple days, so I've been better, but if you like this madness, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.